I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, pressed stop on the recording app. His face went through colors I'd never seen on a human being. Red, white, a strange grayish green that reminded me of old moss. "You set me up." $11 million. Spread across 2 years. Hidden in plain sight in the margins of our books. Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk through your door wearing a black hat. It sits across from you at breakfast. It asks about your kids. This is the story of how my best friend stole from me and set me up to take the fall, and how I stopped him. I'm going to show you exactly how. But to understand that, we have to go back to 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. At 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in November, I discovered that my best friend had stolen $11 million from me. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing he had spent 2 years setting me up to take the fall. This is the story of how I survived it, and how I made him pay. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I built something. For 12 years, I built a forensic accounting firm from a single desk in a borrowed office to a company that governments trusted with their secrets. I had 73 employees. Corner office. A partner I'd known since graduate school. Marcus Chen. I want you to remember that name. Not because he's the villain of this story, though he is, but because understanding Marcus is the key to understanding everything that follows. We met at Columbia. Systems analysis. I was the quiet one who saw patterns in chaos. Marcus was the one who made chaos look like opportunity. We were perfect complements, or so I believed for 13 years. Here's something they don't teach you in business school. Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk through your door wearing a black hat. It sits across from you at breakfast. It asks about your kids. It signs your birthday cards with inside jokes you've shared for a decade. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday, at an hour when honest people are sleeping, it leaves a fingerprint. I wasn't supposed to be in the office that night. My daughter had a recital the next morning. I should have been home, sleeping, dreaming of her nervous smile as she approached the piano. Instead, I was staring at a screen, chasing a discrepancy that had been nagging at me for weeks. Here's the thing about patterns. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. For 3 weeks, I'd noticed something wrong with our monthly reconciliations. Not wrong in a way I could articulate. Wrong in a way I could feel. Like a photograph that's been altered by someone skilled. To most eyes, it looks perfect. But to someone who knows the original, something is just slightly off. The server room hummed its eternal white noise. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The coffee in my cup had long gone cold, leaving a ring on the papers beside me. And then I found it. A ledger entry. Simple. Unremarkable. A transfer to a vendor called Prometheus Holdings. Prometheus. The titan who stole fire from the gods. In any other context, I might have smiled at the classical reference. Marcus always did love his mythology. But at 2:47 a.m., with the building silent around me and something cold crawling up my spine, I didn't smile. I pulled the original ledger from 3 months ago, the one I'd personally reviewed, the one I'd signed off on. The entry wasn't there. Someone had added it retroactively. Someone had altered a document I had certified as accurate. Someone had used my signature, my reputation, to authorize a transaction I'd never seen. I sat very still for a long time. Outside my window, the city stretched in every direction. Millions of people sleeping, dreaming, trusting that the systems holding their world together were honest. Trusting that the people maintaining those systems were trustworthy. I had been one of those people. Now, I wasn't sure of anything. What would you do? No, really. I want you to think about this. You've just discovered that someone you trust completely has done something unthinkable. The evidence is right in front of you. But confronting it means destroying everything you've built. It means admitting that your judgment, the judgment you've staked your entire career on, was catastrophically wrong. Most people in that moment would look away. They'd convince themselves they were mistaken. They'd close the file and go home and pretend that 2:47 a.m. never happened. I understand that impulse. I felt it pulling at me like gravity. But I've spent my entire life studying systems, financial systems, legal systems, human systems. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Systems don't lie. People lie. Emotions lie. Memory lies. But the data, the timestamps and the metadata, and the server logs and the cross-references, they tell the truth. They always tell the truth. You just have to know how to read them. I minimized the ledger. I opened our backup server, the one that archived everything automatically, the one that Marcus had argued against implementing because it was redundant. I navigated to the same date, the same file, the original. No Prometheus holdings, no transfer, just the clean, honest numbers I remembered signing off on. I took a screenshot, then another. Then I began to build a timeline. The clock on my wall read 3:15 a.m. I had no idea that by the time the sun rose, I would be fighting for my life. Stay with me here. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is the part where I confront Marcus, where there's a dramatic showdown, where he breaks down and confesses. That's not what happened. What happened was much, much worse. Over the next 6 hours, I traced the thread. One transaction became 7. Prometheus Holdings connected to Icarus Consulting, which connected to Daedalus Capital, which connected to a web of shell companies spanning 4 continents, all of them with mythological names, all of them with the same beneficial owner hidden behind layers of corporate obfuscation. $11 million. Spread across 2 years. Hidden in plain sight in the margins of our books. In the rounding errors, the timing differences, the small inconsistencies that everyone noticed, but no one questioned, because they trusted the person making them. They trusted Marcus. And here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. So did I. Let me tell you about trust. When I was 8 years old, my father taught me to play chess. He was a patient man, methodical, the kind of person who believed that every problem had a solution if you looked at it from the right angle. The board never lies, he told me. People will tell you what they think you want to hear. They'll justify. They'll rationalize. But the pieces on the board, they're exactly where they are. No more. No less. I became very good at chess. By 14, I was competing nationally. By 17, I was being recruited by schools I couldn't have afforded otherwise. But the real lesson, the one that would save my life 30 years later, wasn't about chess at all. It was about systems. My father was a forensic accountant before the term existed. He spent his career tracking money through corporate labyrinths, finding the patterns that criminals thought they'd hidden. He taught me that every transaction leaves a trace. Every lie creates a discrepancy. Every system, no matter how corrupted, contains within it the evidence of its own corruption. The truth is patient, he used to say. It doesn't care if you believe it. It just waits. At 6:30 a.m. on that Tuesday morning, I understood what he meant. I had mapped the entire network, every shell company, every transfer, every timestamp that contradicted Marcus's carefully constructed narrative. But I also understood something else. I was in danger, not physical danger, Not yet. Something worse. I was in danger of becoming complicit. You see, the transactions bore my signature. The ledgers had been altered under my watch. If I went to the authorities now, with nothing but screenshots and suspicions, Marcus would have one obvious defense. I was in on it. He'd point to my access, my oversight, my signature on documents I'd clearly never read carefully enough. He'd paint me as the mastermind trying to pin his crimes on an innocent partner. And the terrible truth? He might be believed. In white-collar crime, the person who looks guilty usually is. And right now, standing in the cold light of morning with my coffee-stained shirt and my bloodshot eyes, I looked very guilty indeed. At 7:15 a.m., I heard the elevator. Footsteps in the hallway. Familiar footsteps. The confident stride of a man who believed he was untouchable. I closed every window, deleted my search history, walked calmly back to my office, and sat down at my desk, as if I'd just arrived early to get a head start on the day. Marcus appeared in my doorway at 7:22. "You're in early," he said. His smile hadn't changed in 13 years. Open. Warm. The smile of a man who would never, ever betray you. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Sarah's recital is today." "Ah." He nodded, leaned against the doorframe. "She ready?" Nervous. But ready. Like her dad before a big audit. I laughed. He laughed. Two old friends sharing a moment. And underneath my desk, my hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against my thighs to make them stop. That conversation lasted 4 minutes. We talked about Sarah, about the quarterly report due next week, about a potential new client Marcus was courting. "Prometheus Holdings," he said casually. "Infrastructure consulting. Could be a big get." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Sounds promising," I managed. "Could be." He checked his watch. "Breakfast meeting. I'll fill you in later." He walked away. His footsteps faded down the hall. The elevator chimed, and I sat alone in my office, staring at the wall, understanding for the first time just how dangerous my partner really was. He wasn't just stealing money. He was setting me up to take the fall. I didn't yet understand how far Marcus was willing to go. Here's where most people would panic. They'd run to lawyers. They'd confront the thief. They'd make moves that felt decisive, but were actually desperate. I did none of those things. Instead, I became invisible. There's a principle in game theory called strategic patience. It's the idea that sometimes the strongest move is no move at all. You wait. You watch. You let your opponent believe they're winning. And then, when they've committed themselves fully to their strategy, when they've exposed every weakness and closed every escape route, you strike. For the next 8 weeks, I was the most patient person alive. On the surface, nothing changed. I attended meetings, reviewed reports, had dinner with Marcus and his wife, watched my daughter perform at recitals, celebrated Thanksgiving with family, who had no idea that their lives were about to be upended. But underneath that surface, I was building something. Every night after everyone went home, I returned to the office. I became a ghost in my own company. Arriving after security made their rounds, leaving before the cleaning crew arrived. I wore gloves. I used a laptop that wasn't connected to our network. I left no digital fingerprints whatsoever. And slowly, methodically, I reconstructed the crime. Let me explain something about financial fraud. Most people think it's about hiding money. They picture briefcases full of cash, offshore accounts in tropical locations, the kind of thing you see in movies. The reality is both simpler and more complicated. Financial fraud is about creating a narrative. It's about constructing a story that explains where money came from and where it went. A story that's consistent enough to satisfy auditors and regulators and anyone else who might be looking. Marcus was good at this. Very good. But I was better. Because Marcus built his narrative the way most criminals do. Forward. He created the crime first, then constructed the story to hide it. I worked backward. I started with the endpoints, the shell companies, the final destinations of the stolen money, and traced the logic in reverse. Every shell company needed a purpose. Every transfer needed a justification. Every piece of paper needed a signature. And signatures, unlike people, don't lie. Week 3, I found the first crack. Daedalus Capital had been incorporated in Delaware using a registered agent that specialized in anonymous formations. The beneficial owner was hidden behind a trust that was hidden behind another trust that was registered in the Cayman Islands. Impenetrable. Or so it would seem. But here's what Marcus forgot. Every legal entity needs a bank account. And every bank account, no matter how carefully shielded, requires identity verification under anti-money laundering laws. The bank that opened Daedalus Capital's account was one we used ourselves, a small regional bank that valued relationships over scale, a bank where I'd once helped the compliance officer track down a complex fraud scheme, a bank where I still had contacts. I made a phone call, not to report Marcus. Not yet. Just a casual conversation with an old colleague, catching up over coffee, asking about her kids, her husband, her new corner office, and casually, so casually, mentioning that I was doing some background on a potential client called Daedalus Capital. "Oh," she said, stirring her latte. "That's funny. We actually just closed that account." Closed it? Regulatory issue. The beneficial ownership documents were inconsistent. We sent multiple requests for clarification, but they never responded. Eventually, we had to file an SAR, a suspicious activity report, filed with FinCEN, the Federal Financial Crimes Network. I felt the first flutter of something that might have been hope. When was this? About 6 weeks ago. 6 weeks. Right around the time I discovered the altered ledger. The net was already closing. Marcus just didn't know it yet. At that moment, I still believed I might walk away from this intact. I was wrong. Week 5. I had documented everything. Every transaction, every shell company, every altered document. I had screenshots from the backup server proving the retroactive changes. I had a timeline showing exactly when each modification was made, cross-referenced with access logs showing who was logged into the system at those moments. It was Marcus. Every single time. But I still wasn't ready, because I knew how this would go if I moved too early. Marcus would claim I falsified the evidence. He'd argue that I had access to the same systems, the same backups, the same timestamps. He'd paint himself as the victim and me as the mastermind. I needed something more. I needed him to confess. There's a trick interrogators use. They call it assumptive questioning. Instead of asking, "Did you do it?" which invites denial, you ask, "Why did you do it?" The question assumes guilt. It shifts the focus from denial to justification. And human beings, when they feel cornered, have an almost irresistible urge to explain themselves. I spent 2 weeks engineering the perfect conversation. I dropped hints about the upcoming external audit, mentioned that regulators were asking questions about some of our offshore transfers, complained about increased scrutiny from our liability insurance carrier. I watched Marcus get nervous. His smile didn't change. It never did. But his eyes did. They got sharper, hungrier. The eyes of a man calculating odds, looking for exits. And then, on a Thursday evening in January, I made my move. What I'm about to describe is something I've never told anyone. Not the investigators, not my lawyers, not even my wife. Because if this had gone wrong, if Marcus had reacted differently, if any one of 100 variables had shifted, I might not be here to tell you this story. But it didn't go wrong. It went exactly according to plan. I invited Marcus for a drink. Nothing unusual. We'd done this hundreds of times over the years. Unwinding after a hard week, celebrating a successful audit, commiserating over a difficult client. But this time, I chose the location carefully. A quiet wine bar near the office, private booths with high backs, soft music that made conversation feel intimate, the kind of place where people told secrets. And critically, the kind of place where a recording device in a jacket pocket wouldn't seem out of place. Before you ask, yes, I knew the legal risks. In some states, recording a conversation without consent is a felony. But we were in New York, a one-party consent state. As long as I was part of the conversation, the recording was admissible. I'd done my homework. Marcus arrived at 7:30, looking relaxed. He ordered a Barolo, his usual, and we talked about nothing for 20 minutes. The weather, a mutual friend's divorce, the Knicks' playoff chances. And then I sighed, rubbed my temples, and said the words I'd rehearsed 50 times. I need to tell you something. His eyebrows rose. What's wrong? I made a mistake. What kind of mistake? I leaned forward, lowered my voice, let the confession flow like a man unburdening himself to his closest friend. I found something, I said. In the books, a few weeks ago, some irregularities. I watched his face, the micro expressions that flicker across a human face when they hear unexpected news, the slight widening of the eyes, the almost imperceptible tightening of the jaw. What kind of irregularities? Transfers. To some companies I'd never heard of. Prometheus Holdings, Icarus Consulting. I paused. You know anything about those? The moment stretched. In chess, there's a concept called Zugzwang. It means a position where any move a player makes weakens their position. The only winning move is not to move at all. But that's not an option. You have to do something. Marcus was in Zugzwang. He could deny knowing anything, but that would contradict his earlier mention of Prometheus as a potential client. He could claim ignorance, but that would raise questions about his oversight. He could confess, but confession meant prison. I watched him calculate, and then he made his choice. Where did you find this? The backup server. His eyes flickered, just for an instant. But it was enough. The backup server we decommissioned last year? I never decommissioned it. I just moved it to a different partition. Silence. In that silence, I could hear his entire worldview rearranging itself. The partner he'd dismissed as a quiet, trusting, pattern-obsessed technician, that partner had just revealed he'd been watching the whole time. How much do you know? He asked finally. Enough. Enough for what? I took a sip of wine, held his gaze. Let the silence stretch until it was unbearable. That depends on you. This was the moment where a single wrong word could have destroyed everything. What happened next is the reason I'm telling you this story. Because Marcus didn't crumble. He didn't beg. He didn't threaten. He calculated. Okay, he said slowly. What do you want? The truth. You know the truth. I know the numbers. I don't know the why. He laughed. A short, bitter sound. The why? You want to know the why? I think I deserve that much. And then, for 37 minutes, Marcus Chen told me exactly how he'd stolen $11 million from our company. He explained the shell companies, why he'd named them after mythology, a private joke with himself about hubris and downfall. He detailed the transfer mechanisms, how he'd exploited timing differences between our billing system and our accounting system. He described the alterations, how he'd carefully modified historical records to create a paper trail that would implicate me if anyone looked too closely. It wasn't personal, he said. I needed you as a backstop, an insurance policy. If it ever unraveled, you were the one with the signatures. You were the one with the access. You were the one who'd look guilty. I sat very still. Why? I asked. After everything? He shrugged. Because I could. Because I was smarter than everyone else. Because this whole system, this whole financial system built on trust and audits and good faith, it's a joke. It's just numbers on a screen. And whoever figures out how to move those numbers fastest wins. And the people who get hurt? Collateral damage. I finished my wine, set the glass down carefully, and then I said the words I'd been waiting to say for 8 weeks. Thank you, Marcus. For what? For making this easier. His brow furrowed. Making what easier? I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out my phone, pressed stop on the recording app. This. The next 17 minutes were the longest of my life. I watched Marcus process what had just happened. Denial, anger, bargaining. All the stages of grief compressed into the space between one heartbeat and the next. You recorded me. Yes. You can't. One-party consent state, Marcus. I checked. His face went through colors I'd never seen on a human being. Red. White. A strange grayish green that reminded me of old moss. You set me up? No. I leaned forward. You set yourself up. 12 years ago, when you decided that the rules didn't apply to you. All I did was document it. I'll say you edited the recording. I'll say you coerced me. You can try. But there's also the SAR that's already been filed on Daedalus Capital, and the internal emails you sent from your work account, and the access logs showing you modified the backup server, the one you thought I'd decommissioned, and the shell company record that traces back to a trust with your brother-in-law as the registered agent. He stared at me. You've been planning this. I've been documenting this. There's a difference. Here's what people don't understand about revenge. Real revenge, the kind that actually matters, isn't about hurting the person who wronged you. It's about restoring balance. It's about making the universe make sense again. Marcus had stolen $11 million. He'd tried to frame me for his crimes. He'd spent 2 years looking me in the eye while plotting my destruction. But the money wasn't really the point. The point was that he'd made me doubt myself. He'd made me question my judgment, my relationships, my ability to read people. He'd taken the foundation of my life and shown me that it was built on sand. This wasn't about punishment. This was about proving that the foundation was solid after all. What do you want? Marcus asked finally. His voice had changed. Smaller. Older. The voice of a man who'd finally realized he wasn't the smartest person in the room. I want you to call your lawyer. And then? And then you're going to turn yourself in. He laughed again. Hollow this time. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to the FBI tomorrow morning with everything I have. And when I do, I'm going to make sure they understand that this wasn't just theft. This was a conspiracy to frame an innocent person. That changes the charges. That changes the sentencing guidelines. That makes this a very, very different kind of case. You're bluffing. I stood up, dropped money on the table, and delivered the line I'd been rehearsing for weeks. Marcus, in 13 years, have I ever bluffed? He didn't answer. I walked out of the bar into the cold January night, and behind me, I heard something I'd never heard from Marcus Chen before. Silence, Marcus called his lawyer that night. By morning, they'd reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office. By afternoon, they were negotiating terms for a voluntary surrender. I learned all this secondhand, from the FBI agents who showed up at my door 2 days later, from the prosecutors who took my statement, from the lawyers who would spend the next 18 months untangling the web Marcus had woven. But there's one moment from that period that I'll never forget. 3 weeks after Marcus's arrest, I got a phone call. It was from his wife, Jennifer, a woman I'd known for 15 years, a woman who'd hosted Thanksgiving dinners at their home, who'd sent birthday cards to my daughter, who'd trusted her husband with the same blind faith I once had. "I need to see you," she said. I met her at a coffee shop near her house. She looked like she'd aged a decade in 3 weeks. "Did you know?" she asked. "No." "When did you find out?" "November. And you waited until January to do anything?" I stirred my coffee, watched the cream spiral into the darkness. I needed to be sure. She was quiet for a long time. "He's saying you framed him. He's saying you're the one who did it." "I know. Is it true?" I looked at her. Really looked. This woman who'd done nothing wrong, whose life had been destroyed by a man she trusted. "Do you believe it's true?" She held my gaze, and in her eyes, I saw something I recognized. The same thing I'd seen in my own reflection, late at night, when I'd questioned everything I thought I knew. Doubt. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered. "Neither did I said. For 8 weeks, I didn't know what was real. I didn't know if I could trust my own judgment. I didn't know if everything I'd built was a lie. "How did you get through it?" I reached into my jacket, pulled out a flash drive, slid it across the table. "The truth," I said. "It's all there. Every transaction, every timestamp, every piece of evidence. I made a copy for you. Not because you need to believe me, but because you deserve to know what really happened." She looked at the drive like it was a bomb. "Why would you give this to me?" "Because someone should have given it to me. 13 years ago, when Marcus and I were starting out. Someone should have warned me that the person sitting across from me was capable of this. No one did. So I'm giving you what I wish I'd had. The truth. The truth." She took the drive, put it in her purse. And then she said something that still haunts me. Was he always like this? I thought about the question. Really thought about it. "I don't know," I said, finally. "Maybe. Or maybe he changed somewhere along the way. Maybe there was a moment, years ago, when he made a small compromise, a tiny ethical shortcut that seemed harmless at the time, and then another, and another, until the person I thought I knew was just gone. Does it matter?" Which one it was? I shook my head. No, it doesn't, because either way, the result is the same. Marcus Chen pleaded guilty to 12 counts of wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. I watched from the gallery as they led him away. He didn't look at me. Not once. But just before he disappeared through the door, he stopped. His lawyer leaned in, whispered something. Marcus shook his head. And then he was gone. People ask me sometimes how I feel about what I did. They want to know if I feel vindicated, if I feel satisfied, if revenge, in the end, lived up to its promise. I never know how to answer. The company survived. Barely. We lost 3 major clients and half our staff in the months after the scandal broke. The regulatory investigations alone cost us $2 million. But we survived. I bought out Marcus's share of the partnership for $1, a symbolic transaction that both his lawyers and mine agreed was appropriate. The dollar is still on my desk. Sometimes I pick it up and look at it. This crumpled, worthless piece of paper that represents everything I lost and everything I saved. My daughter asked me about it once. "Why do you keep that?" she said. "It's just $1. I thought about how to explain it, how to tell her about trust and betrayal and the long, terrible arithmetic of justice. "It reminds me of something," I said finally. "What?" "That the things that matter most, the things that really matter, can't be measured in dollars." She looked at me with the infinite wisdom of a 13-year-old who thinks her father is being hopelessly corny. "That's deep, Dad. Thank you. Also kind of weird. Also true. There's one more thing I need to tell you, one detail that I've left out until now because I wasn't sure how to explain it. The evidence I gathered, all of it, was hidden in the margins of our own books. Not literally hidden, not encoded or encrypted or tucked away in some secret file, just overlooked. The discrepancies were there the whole time, the timestamp inconsistencies, the mythologically named shell companies, the retroactive ledger modifications. All of it was sitting in plain sight, waiting for someone to see it. Marcus didn't hide his crimes. He bet on no one looking. And for 2 years, he was right. That's the real lesson of this story. Not that justice prevails. Not that the good guys win. Not that patience and planning will always defeat betrayal. The real lesson is simpler, darker, more important. The truth is always there. It's written in the data, in the timestamps, in the metadata, in the patterns that emerge when you look closely enough. The truth doesn't hide. We just choose not to see it. I chose to see it. And once I did, I couldn't look away. It's been 4 years since that night in November. 4 years since I discovered the altered ledger. 4 years since I learned that my best friend was my worst enemy. The company is thriving now. We've rebuilt, restructured, hired people I trust, though I'm more careful about that word now. Marcus is 2 years into his sentence at a minimum security facility in Pennsylvania. I hear he's teaching other inmates how to play chess. I hope he's learned something about patterns. Sometimes late at night, I go back to the office. Not to work, not to investigate, just to sit in the quiet and remember. I pull out the original ledger, the unaltered one, the true one, and I trace my fingers over the columns. The debits and credits, the ins and outs, the endless flow of numbers that represent everything we owe each other. And I think about trust, how fragile it is, how easily broken, how difficult to rebuild once it's been shattered. I think about Marcus, alone in his cell, surrounded by the wreckage of a life he chose to destroy. And I think about myself, the person I was before, the person I am now. There's a quote I've been thinking about lately. It's from Marcus Aurelius. Ironic, given my former partner's name. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. For 2 years, I was surrounded by insanity, by lies presented as truth, by betrayal dressed up as partnership, by a man who looked me in the eye every day while planning my destruction. I could have joined him. I could have looked away. I could have chosen not to see what was right in front of me. Instead, I chose to look. I chose to see. I chose to remember that the truth is patient, that it doesn't care if you believe it, that it just waits. And in the end, the truth was right there all along, in the ledger, in the margins, waiting for someone who knew how to read it. My name doesn't matter. But if you take anything from this story, take this. The people who betray you aren't wearing black hats. They're sitting across from you at breakfast. They're asking about your kids. They're signing your birthday cards with inside jokes you've shared for years. And they're betting that you'll never look closely enough to see what they're doing. Don't let them win that bet. Learn to read the ledger, because the truth is always there. You just have to choose to see it. There's one thing I didn't mention. One detail I left out. 2 months ago, I received a letter. No return address. Postmarked from Pennsylvania. Inside was a single piece of paper. A chess notation. 1. E4. E5, 2. Knight of 3. Knight C6, 3. BB5. The Ruy Lopez. The Spanish game. One of the oldest and most studied openings in chess. But this version had a twist. The notation continued for 67 moves, and when I played it out on my board, I realized what it was. A game Marcus and I had played in graduate school, the first game we ever played together. At move 43, there was a new annotation, just 2 words, "Well played." I haven't replied. But sometimes, late at night, I set up the board. And I wonder if he finally understands. The truth doesn't care about winning or losing. It just waits.